Alright, I'm Eli Bunyi.
I'm Mcadams, and for our engineering thesis, we made an all-encompassing adoption app that provides insight to families considering adoption.
And the app's name is Adoption Pathways.
All right, so from the very beginning, Eli and I knew that app development was a subject that we wanted to pursue. Neither of us had ever made an app before, and we knew that that was something that would take about a year's time to fully develop. Originally, we floated around the idea of creating an app for veterans, one that would help with veteran employment or maybe veteran mental health advocacy. But we found that there were already veteran apps out there, and it would be hard to match the amount of tools and resources provided by, say, a local VA.
So as you can see, this is what pulls up when you search veterans in the App Store, and there are already so many apps that are pretty comprehensive looking, and we just felt it wouldn't be the best use of our time.
One of the driving things that really pushed us to make an adoption app, that came from our research process. While we were researching, we found that the adoption system is so convoluted and opaque because of the state and federal bylaws that there are. There's insurmountable amounts of technicalities and requirements. And after a year of working on this product, we finally have an understanding as to why this process takes so long and why it's as difficult as it is. For example, if you live in Tennessee and you've already lined up an adoption with a birth mother, you could be legally responsible for not only that birth mother's medical expenses, you could be legally responsible for counseling, even their living expenses during the birth process. While that may be a small detail, they are written throughout the adoption system by every single state, by every single country. And that's what makes this process so long.
So like Will said, there are a lot of problems with the adoption system in Tennessee alone, but those problems extend outside of our state. Every year, 32,000 orphans turn 18 unadopted, and they're just on their own. Despite their legal status as an independent, those kids, they lack really any of the necessary skills to be a functioning adult in society. Of this population, 60% of the boys have been or are currently convicted of a crime. 1 in 2 will develop a substance addiction. And for the girls, 7 out of 10 of that population will be pregnant by age 21. So you see that not having a family of any kind, it really hurts your chances to succeed in society. So all this, it led us to really focus on adoption. We felt like it would be a very important subject of our app, and it led us to just our general research question of how can we effectively organize and present the adoption process to make it easier on prospective parents or adopters. So after we'd completed our research and we were ready to start making our app, we really just asked ourselves 2 main questions. The biggest goal of our app was one, what organizational tools we could provide to families who are considering adoption, and then for families who had already completed adoption, what mental health resources we could provide them. And with these 2 in mind, we just came up with a list of features that we thought would be most important for our app.
So throughout the year, this is a list of our features that we ended up compiling, and the first 4 or 5, the complete checklist, the cost calculator, finding an agency, state laws and federal forms, those are really just to help with our first goal of addressing the organizational needs of prospective adopters. And then the next 2, the hear from families and advice after adoption, those are really to address people who have already adopted and the mental health aspects.
Another thing to consider is that this is the final checklist of our features. You'll see in the videos that follow the progress that our app made throughout the year. The names of these features might change and their functionality will change as well. And that resulted from the feedback that we got from advisors, mentors. We had a lot of people test the app, we had a lot of user feedback, and we took all of that into account as we developed the app. Seeing as to how Eli and I had never made an app before, we decided to go through a third-party app development program called AppyPie. This screen recording is just the rough version of our app. This is what the app looked like in about November, October, that sort of time frame. as you can see, we were just now getting familiar with the features. Our cost calculator was just a simple calculator. We had very few nearby agencies, and our state laws page only had Tennessee. From there, we would make a lot more changes. Probably the most important thing about adoption pathways was that it had real-world use. We wanted to address the gaps and needs in the adoption system. For instance, let's say even with the most basic adoption, you would more than likely have to complete a home study. Home studies are extensive. They require in-home visits, background checks, orientations, training. If it's an international adoption, you'd need to have a copy of your I-800A, your I-800, your I-79. Not to mention, you'd also need copies of your ID, birth certificates, social security card, marriage certificates, proof of citizenship, income, employment, just so many things. That's honestly what makes this process so long and grueling. And one of the ways that we tried to address those needs was with our checklist feature.
So this is our app in mid-January. As you can see, we were just focused on cosmetic changes. Our homepage had changed. We added some backgrounds to About Us page. We also added a website feature, which ended up not being its own piece in our final version of our app. But yeah, we were really just focused on cosmetics. And the biggest thing we added in this month, January, was our checklist. It was something we took a while for us to do. We're going through the forms right now. As you can see, we put in like all of the necessary things you need to adopt. You could add notes to each feature and it saves every time you leave the app. Yeah, from this point on, we really did believe that our app had future implications that were substantial. For example, when you search adoption in the App Store, this is something we found out earlier in the year. Just about everything you find is about pets, about dogs, cats, and even the ones that did focus on children were really focused on finding other birth mothers who are willing to give up their children, which is something that's much less common than people think in the adoption community. So we really felt like our app was doing something that no other app currently on the App Store could do. Yeah, so this is our final home screen. You can see we cleaned it up and our checklist stayed about the same from early January. You can still add notes. The notes save from every time. This is a different clip and that note's still saved. Alright, this is how our cost calculator turned out. Since we went through AppyPie, a third-party program, we couldn't code our own, but this is what we think is the next best thing. It's a cost estimator. But what still makes this a valuable resource is that it's state by state and it has all variants of adoption included. So it takes into account whether you're doing a domestic or international adoption. So one of our biggest features is the Find an Agency directory. Originally it was just Tennessee agencies nearby, but we expanded to all 50 states. Here's California, for example. We got 3 agencies, highly reviewed, and it'll give you phone number, directions straight from the app. Alright, so this is our state laws feature. As you can see, it's separated state by state. Any technicalities or state-specific laws that would be related to adoption you would find on this feature. For instance, that Tennessee technicality that I mentioned earlier in the video, that would be located here in this feature. Another thing to consider with this feature is that you aren't limited to the information that's provided whenever you click on your state. All of our resources have extensions with other valuable information on adoptions regarding your state. And our federal forms feature is set up in a similar fashion. So these next 2 features are really to help address the mental health aspect of adoption. The advice after adopting page here, this tool has really any advice a family might need once they adopt. And then we also have our testimonials / hear from families feature. For this, Will's mom reached out on Facebook and we were just overwhelmed by the amount of responses we were able to get. This clip only shows like 5 or 6 of them, but I think it was somewhere in the range of like 100 to 150 responses. And we think it'll be really useful for the users of our app to just get advice from real people. who've adopted and gone through the process before. And finally, we just have our About Us feature.
So that's mostly it for our app. Some things that we would have done differently. From the very start, I wish that we would have learned how to code. That way we could have made the app more our own and done everything that we wanted down to the finest detail. We also wanted to hit more on the mental health aspect of adoption, but unfortunately with all the state laws and agency finders, those took so long to make. They were really grueling and there was a lot of small details that needed to go into it. And then another feature that we thought of towards the final stages of our app would have been a form tutorials feature. So like those most common adoption forms like the I-800 and the I-800A, just a tutorial feature of like how to fill those out because a lot of people have trouble with it.
Yeah, so as the time of the recording right now, our app is under review with the App Store. We submitted it during spring break, so hopefully we'll have it uploaded for the expo. People will be able to download it, maybe not, but either way, it's Adoption Pathways on the App Store.
Hopefully you'll see it on the App Store soon. Special thanks to Miss Benjamin, Dr. Rowland, Mr. Guthrie, and our mentor, big man Mike Klimmer. Thanks.